Well, hello to my unseen but definitely good-looking and intelligent, discerning audience. I have some catching up to do with you. I haven't recorded the Cambodian VR Project podcast for several days now, but I have a good reason for it, and I will catch you up and explain why over the course of the next, 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that. I'm Tom Nickel, for those of you who are starting to listen to this podcast for the first time right now. Hard to imagine that could be the case, but maybe it is. What I've been doing is sharing the story of a project involving virtual reality, new media technologies, and the arts in Cambodia. I'm kind of informally working on all of those fronts. If you become a regular podcast listener, you'll learn more about it. In fact, if you just listen to this podcast, you might learn more about it. Where I left off, I think it was Sunday, and today is Wednesday. And that Sunday, the last podcast, episode 8, so we are now on podcast episode 9, Bunrith and I had recorded a dancer, Abel, and got a lot of her story and what inspires her, what she thinks the role of dance is. We had really fun doing that interview, and I have done a podcast about it. The next day, Monday, a little bit later in the day, I went with Arn Chornpond and Sema and a few others up to their place north of the city, along a little tributary of the Mekong River. It's about a 45-minute drive or more out of Phnom Penh, because the idea was we were going to take off early the next morning on the Khmer Magic Music Bus. I might have introduced the KMMB briefly on past podcasts, maybe not. Arn Chornpond, the extraordinary man who founded Cambodian Living Arts, I don't know what date you want to use, but it was back in the 1990s when Cambodia was starting to get back on its feet again, barely starting to get back on its feet again, that Arn Chornpond, a refugee, came back to Cambodia, started looking for artists who had survived the Khmer Rouge years by disguising themselves, really. That's what had to be done, because the Khmer Rouge killed almost all the artists. And Arn, with the help in the early years of one of my best friends in the world, Al Morgan, and then in the subsequent years, many, many big-hearted people and foundations, and it took a lot of effort, but they have built a thriving organization all these years later, dedicated to supporting, growing, creating a firm economic base for the arts in Cambodia. That's Cambodian Living Arts. That's the organization, on one hand, I'm here to work with. And then Arn, as a typical, founder, as the organization matured, really, people who had the skill set to be the CEO of a, major organization with, I think they got 30 or 40 staff people there now, have really moved into the leadership of CLA. And Arn, about, depends where you want to date it, 3-4 years ago, started off on kind of another idea, which was take the music out to the people. There are villages all over Cambodia where traditional Cambodian music has not been heard live performed for at least a generation, because there weren't any artists to do it. And Arn, feeling pretty good about the way Cambodian Living Arts was going, but, I guess the turn from working directly with artists and performing to becoming more of a sort of a catalyst and a platform and a support function for artists, it left Arn wanting to do something different. So, as we'll learn more as we go along how he did this, he got a bus, a big old, I can't remember, a 16-seat bus, something like that. The story of how he did it is quite something. And that is used to take the music out to the people, drive it out into remote villages on one-track little roads, and perform for kids and adults, again, who have not heard their own Khmer music, in most cases, ever. And I was going to have, and did have, the good fortune of going with him. The reason for me was that I'm hoping to really focus my storytelling activity and projects and kind of all the things that I have been planning on doing with this project on the bus. Again, I'll say more about it, but earlier on in the project, I thought I would be taking a broader look at a range of artists across all of Cambodia and be making a prototype for Cambodian Living Arts of something that might be thought of as a weekly web-based or bi-weekly, I don't know what the period would be, but some kind of a regularly scheduled web-based program that featured arts and artists and culture in Cambodia. And one week it would be a dancer, and the next week it could be a poet, and the next week it could be a painter or a photographer, or there are people for whom Khmer cuisine is both art and certainly a cultural artifact. So I was thinking of a pretty broad net, and the recording that you heard the story of in episode 8 with Abel was a first step in that direction, recording one of the premier dancers, an interview with one of the premier dancers in Cambodia as a kickoff of that idea. But when I thought more about the bus, and in particular now that I've experienced being on the bus, I see that given the resources we have and where things stand, it's really best. It is such a great story, and why do anything other than focus on that? So that's kind of how I'm feeling right now, and as you'll hear in the rest of this podcast, sort of how I got to feeling that way. Okay, so first of all, one thing you've got to understand before I go any further, Arn Chornpond is not a regular old person like the rest of us. If he were, he would not have survived the killing fields, would not have been able to crawl at the age of 14 to the Thai border through the jungle and then arrive there with malarial diseases of some sort and still survive, and then come back and find the artists and build the CLA. And that's not a regular old person. He's relentless. And all day long before I met him on met up with him on Monday, he'd been driving down from Angkor Wat, from Siem Reap, with Sema, his partner, and I guess 7 young women who they were taken to go see Angkor Wat for the first time. And the 6-hour drive down from Angkor Wat, pick me up, then back up north of Phnom Penh along the river to their place. He was tired. Sema had a toothache. She had been, taking these young women around and organizing all the details of planning the next Khmer Magic music bus session. She manages a lot of things, and for about 3 days had a toothache that she didn't complain about out loud. Before we headed north out of the city that evening, she stopped at some kind of a clinic and just went in there, and the guy took one look at it, yanked it out. She got back in the car, and we went home. She felt much better, and by a couple hours later that evening, it was like, what toothache? So eventually, it was probably 9 o'clock by the time we got to their place. 9 o'clock at night, it was dark, so it's funny to arrive at a place in the dark. I had been to their house before. I knew what to expect to some extent. I had been up there about a year ago with Al Morgan when we were here together, and it was just when Arn was actually moving in. The story behind the house is that, again, he doesn't take care of himself. He's just out there every day doing what he feels needs to be done. And like a lot of founders, wasn't, kind of planning for his future retirement, but a big-hearted donor, recognizing that Arn is a person distinct from Cambodian Living Arts, gave an amount of money that enabled Cambodian Living Arts to buy a house for Arn. And he designed it, and it got built, and there it is. And it's funny. It's not a typical Khmer house, but it is certainly not a normal Western house either. It's kind of a combination of both, which is Arn. Again, to be very clear, he was caught up in the Khmer Rouge years at about the age of 10. He lived with his family in Battambang. Most of his family, although not all of his family, were killed during those years. He did survive 4 years of the killing fields, was then impressed into battle against the North Vietnamese, escaped. He was adopted by someone in Vermont. And so at the age then of 14 or so, woke up one morning and found himself in Vermont, where he went to high school, went eventually went down to Brown for university, and eventually graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, International Relations, I think. Makes sense. After that, also was still in the U.S. Doing work with younger Khmer youth who were in Lowell, Mass, for instance, one of the areas where a lot of Cambodian refugees went to, and he was trying to sort of organize healthy, constructive activities and skill-building things for kids there that were having difficulties. My friend Al knew Arn in those days, and that time that they spent together there in Lowell planning and talking and whatnot was the basis of then going back to Cambodia and starting the organization. So now we have Arn many, many years later. Do the math. If he was 10 in about 1975, that would make him, about 50 now. And he's not slowing down a lot, although I guess somewhat. And his place is, as I say, a reflection of his two halves, all the years he spent in the West, and then, of course, he is Cambodian. And so, for instance, there's no inside kitchen with a kitchen sink and all the things that you'd think of in a Western house. In fact, there isn't running tap water at a faucet in the house. There is, on the other hand, outside, a normal kind of sit-down Western-style toilet that flushes and everything. So they have a water line that goes to the house, and they use it to, again, kind of serve the bathroom, and also the water goes into a kind of a cistern, kind of a holding tank, several holding tanks they have, where they then draw the water out and do their washing and all that kind of stuff. But so it's different. I mean, it's certainly not like being in a hotel, and really not like sleeping over in someone's house in the way we would understand that to mean. There is one room. There's a lot of rooms in the house. Not a lot. There's several rooms in the house, and most of them are given to the audio production studio and facility that Arn wanted. That's what he really wants to be doing. He sees himself creating and composing and producing music there with his own production facility, and also the music recorded live from the KMMB performances, that kind of thing. So a lot of the house that's it, studio. There's kind of one bedroom area, and another kind of general, I don't know what you'd call it, area. The kitchen, such as it is outside, but under a roof. And there's a beautiful porch, a big porch, and then the porch overlooks the tributary of the Mekong River. It flows sort of gently down there, and there's nice trees and reeds and then fields over on the other side. It's a really idyllic setting. But, not what you're normally used to when you're sleeping over somewhere. What we actually did was set up some mosquito netting out on that porch, and then put some pads on the floor of the porch, and that was that. Arn and Sema, I guess they didn't want me to feel all lonely out there. I mean, they have a bedroom upstairs, but they frequently, as he says, sleep out there anyway. There's a lot more breeze, so it's, relatively speaking, cooler. It's just kind of a nice place to sleep. So they were over there in their mosquito netting, and I was under my mosquito netting, and with a pad and a thin blanket and a pillow that it was a Mickey Mouse pillow. So there you go. Preposterously, it all worked out. There were noises too. There was dogs and dog barking all night long, really, I guess. Arn also, not surprisingly, doesn't turn off his phone. And people aren't and he has contacts all over the world, and people aren't necessarily cognizant of time. So, and his ringtone isn't just, a ringtone, it's some musical thing, pretty loud, and that can happen at any time during the night, and he takes the call and talks with them. And then there's the roosters. They start very early. I didn't see there was any sun, and there was a lot of them. Some really close at hand, like it felt like they were right down to 6 feet away, and some further away, and it was a lot going on. But as I say, I don't know why, but I got a pretty good night's sleep. They kind of whipped up a modest little dinner with some rice and some fish pretty soon after we got there. And so we chowed down on just a little teeny bit and sat and talked just a little bit. But they were, pretty tired. And so at some, I don't know, 11 o'clock, whatever it was, we retired and got up at probably, I knew that we were planning on leaving at 7. So I got up at 6, and I had a good 6-7 hours of sleep. I woke up intermittently with all the weird stuff going on, but I fall back to sleep again. Probably if I had just thought, rationally about it, I would have said, no, I'll, sleep in my relatively more comfortable setup here in YK Art House down in Phnom Penh than, get an early ride up there in the morning. But the reason I said, no, it'll be nice to spend the night with Arn and Sema, and it's just, there's nothing more intimate than being in someone's home with them and spending the night there. It's really an amazing feeling to do. So I don't care. If it's uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable. So I'm thinking in advance. If I don't get any sleep at all, if I just lie there, I want to do it. Well, I did get a good night's sleep, and then I was the first one up. I woke up at 6. I felt pretty good. The roosters were making a lot of noise. He said there was a shower, but I couldn't find it or figure it out or whatnot. But I, kind of splashed some water around me and did the things I needed to do, and it all worked out okay, and I felt fine, ready to go, kind of thing. I even got a little meditation in. It was tough to find even a place to sit, where I could meditate. But I meditated a little bit, and pretty soon everyone was up. I should say it wasn't just Arn, Sema, and I mentioned all along. I don't know. I forgot. So there was 2 other people with us had driven up last night and also spent the night there. They actually stayed inside in the one room that you could sort of do it inside there. And it is Sema's daughter, whose name I can't quite remember. It's Svei, something like that, and her friend, both of whom are musicians, play traditional Khmer instruments, the throk mai, stringed instrument, and they were there because they were going to be on the bus the next day. So the 5 of us took off at about, packed it up, took off in the van again about 7 o'clock in the morning, and went to where the bus stays, 10 minutes down the road, at Dekha's house. Dekha is Sema's brother. I knew him pretty well. I'd met him a year ago when we went driving around, and we've gotten to know each other. He's learning English, I'm learning Khmer. Somewhere in the middle, we're learning to communicate, but I like him and we like each other. Anyway, it was his place. He and his wife, Srey Tush, and their son, Ait. I have trouble remembering or pronouncing his name. Incredibly cute little 3-year-old, and was with us for the whole day on the bus. We get there, and all the members of the team start assembling by 7. There were, I wasn't being really careful and writing everything down and having notes so I'd get my facts straight before I did this podcast. Obviously, you can tell if you've listened to me. I can't even remember exactly everybody's name and how many there were. I'm just trying to give you an impression right now. I think there was probably 10 musicians altogether on the bus this time. It's, I think there's a group of maybe as many as 16 of them, and as many every time comes as they can, all playing traditional Khmer instruments. A lot of stringed instruments, but some reed, woodwind type of instruments, and then some percussion. Sema sings. Arn plays the flute. I should have mentioned that's one of Arn's things. Arn plays the flute. Anyway, I guess they have their regular way of doing this. After we all got in the bus, it takes a while. We all got there, finally assembled, and after a certain amount of time, the bus took off. Oh, I didn't mention before we got to Dekha's in the bus, just the 5 of us, Arn, Sema, me, and the 2 young women, stopped at a breakfast place. And a breakfast place here, I say it loosely, it's just those incredibly ubiquitous little plastic chairs and tables with a little awning over them, and someone was doing up some kind of porridge and some fried kind of bread. We stopped there and chowed down on that for 10 minutes, then went on to meet up with everyone else. So we got underway, and I guess traditionally they do this. Again, the bus has been going out for 2 years now. They got started with a song. It was really nice. And I should also say, in addition to the Arn and Sema and the rest of the Khmer Magic Music Bus musicians, there was 2 other Westerners also. Cecilia and her friend Joyce, both Americans. Cecilia has a long history in Cambodia. She comes here and teaches personal finance. In schools was how she started doing it, but the connection got made that artists don't get a lot of training in personal finance. They have very unique personal finance needs, and could she come up with ways and do some workshops to help artists in that regard, which she has done, and that's the tie to Cambodian Living Arts, and a really, really good idea. And I guess her friend Joyce is just a friend, and let's go to Cambodia and do some vacationing, and also maybe get to ride on this bus. And they were there. They were nice people. I liked them. Okay, just to back up a little bit, there is one of my favorite traditional Cambodian instruments is a long-necked guitar called a chapé, and I think it's 3 strings, and it's played, well, I don't know, maybe there's a lot of different ways of playing it, but the way that I've heard it played with people who are associated with Cambodian Living Arts, it almost sounds like it's like a Mississippi blues kind of style, and the singing that goes along with it is improvised. It's almost rap. It's not quick staccato rap, although it could be, but it's a storytelling on the fly, playing these kind of bluesy chords as you go. Kong Nai is the world master of it, and he's closely tied to Cambodian Living Arts. One of the masters that Arn kind of brought into the fold many years ago, and he's played all around the world. Well, one of the guys on the bus, Sem Nang, plays the chapé. Not only that, he has got the personality for it. He's able to just kind of freestyle, improvise, rap, and when they did their Let's Go Off on Our Bus song, at one point he kind of took over and soloed on chapé, rapping about what we were going to be doing today, where we were right now, and then started to incorporate Tom and Cecilia and Joyce, into the rap too. And it was just a great way to start a trip, singing an upbeat song, and singing a song that explicitly included everybody. At the beginning of the song, all the people introduced themselves, all the musicians. So, there's a real family atmosphere, a real functional family atmosphere, a lot of joy, a lot of technical musicianship, and some good ideas about how to run a group. Starting off your trip with a song that way. Wow. We drove for I don't know how long it was, a couple hours, and moved around. I did some talking with people. I talked with Sem Nang, the guy who had played the chapé, and just really, really interesting young man, and I'll be talking more about him in this and subsequent podcast episodes, I'm sure. I got to know Cecilia and Joyce a little bit more, and talk with some other folks, and next thing you know, we're driving off the main road onto bumpy little dirt roads, and again, this bus has been going and doing this for a couple of years now, not on normal highways. I can't believe there's a suspension left in the thing, but there is. The luck of Arn or something. It's still going, and we just drove off into the middle of nowhere for a while. Now, I'm not trying to say we're off in the wilds of Borneo and people who hadn't laid eyes on other folks for ever, but it was off the beaten path, way off the beaten path, and eventually we sort of pulled into, well, the very first thing we saw was kind of a old, dilapidated, long kind of structure that I recognized from seeing them before in Cambodia as a school. There was sort of a gate in the front, and we pulled in. Arrangements had been made ahead of time. It's not like they just show up. One of the many incredible things that Sema does is, find out kind of where schools are and where remote villages are, and how she can contact people there and ask if they would like to have a performance and when it would work out, all that kind of stuff. She does all that, and that might sound like a little bit of text messaging and phone calls and whatnot. No, it's not that simple here. Sometimes it means driving out there because there isn't a way to text message or make phone calls. So they knew we were coming, and this wasn't the most remote and out of it village, by any means, but it was, like I say, pretty far off the beaten path. And as soon as the bus pulls in, again, it's this big 20-foot, 30-foot long, bright blue bus with a beautiful logo on it that's the long-necked chapé with a whole bunch of other kind of instruments tucked around and into it. And it's a sensational thing, and the kids, it was a sensation to them. I mean, they'd never seen anything remotely like it before. No one has. There isn't anything like it that I know of. And they came flooding out of the school into kind of the big main sort of outside grassy area outside there. There was a little bit of a makeshift kind of pavilion sort of thing, and the musicians got out their stuff and started to kind of move in that area. But really, it's not like some big formal thing. Within, I don't know, 5 minutes, in a really informal way, they were performing. Sam Nang had gotten his chapeau out and was just starting to do his freestyle thing about where he was right then and making observations about the kids and where they were. And the kids couldn't believe it. Their minds were blown. There was a couple hundred of them around him in this tight circle. 10 minutes after we were there, eventually something a little bit more structured got set up, kind of a big table, and some of the instruments need to be put on a table. They're played like a slide guitar or something like that. I don't know all the names or anything. And some songs were done. All the musicians soloed so they could kind of feature and show about that instrument and how it was played and what noise it made. All of the other musicians have their different kind of presence. No one is like Sam Nang. He's just a natural ham, which is what goes with the instrument that he plays, of course. He knows how to work a crowd, knows how to work kids. He's a star. He's right up there. But the other ones have their own kind of presence too. And there's some excellent musicians in that little group, playing Cambodian versions of guitars and other types of things. So to me, some of the songs they play they're kind of a little bit slow and classical and whatnot, but it's, I guess interesting to see the sounds emitted by these instruments. But some of them get rocking a little bit. I mean, they got some that have a really nice kind of rhythmic beat, almost reggae-esque, that gets you moving, that to me is music that anyone around the world could appreciate, not just like, oh, it's interesting to see what this instrument does. It's just great music. So I think they've got both things going on. I think that they are keeping alive a tradition, spreading that tradition, but also making some really good music for people that's entertaining, that people like, and the kids sure liked it. They wished that we'd stayed all day. In fact, as I understood later, it looked like there was a lot of kids for the size of the school there, and apparently what happened was that half the crowd was from another school that they'd brought over for this event. Because of the timing of their day or whatever it was, about halfway through they had to leave. So it just was kind of funny to me. Everything was going along and they're playing their songs and everyone's loving it, and for reasons I didn't understand, all of a sudden half the crowd just kind of takes off in one direction and is gone. I didn't quite get it. Now I understood later they had to go back to their school. Finally, ours had to end too. The kids had to go back to their school. They wish that it didn't happen, but that's how it goes. That's a Cambodian magical music bus presentation at a school. Start out with a guy playing an instrument that it inherently works for warming up a crowd because it's about being improvised and local and talking about what's happening right then. Combine that with a performer who can do that really well, can relate to kids really well, and then start to play songs and feature the different instruments, and that's what they do. But that's not all. It had also been arranged that we'd be playing a less formal sort of, well, not that the whole thing was formal, play also for a group of villagers. And I guess there was some place where there's a big field, and I guess what you'd say is we made a pop-up event. We drove someplace near the school. I couldn't even say. Somehow we got there and we got out again, walked down these steps past some pigs and other animals that were around. I don't know what's going on. And so some people brought out these big straw mats, and they put the mats out there on the grass, and people started sitting on the mats, and the performers got over on one side and started performing, and they were off again. This wasn't different. There were some kids there, but it wasn't all for kids. It was, what was there? I don't know, 30, 40 adults there. I don't know. But there was some coming and going, too, so I don't know what at any given time. But what was the most striking about it was that half the people were pretty old. And it was something for them to hear this music. Again, if someone in their 60s here might have gone since their childhood and then until now not hearing this type of music and these instruments being played. So there was that. But it's done in a playful way. The Khmer Magic Music Bus is a fun, playful thing, and Sam Nang's personality is very out front about it too. He always warms up the crowd. He always creates a really light atmosphere, not like this big, serious, historical musical instrument thing, but just the fun of it. And he actually gets out there and puts out his hand and tries to get some of the older ladies to come up and dance around with him. And most of them are too shy. There's the one that hung in with him for a little bit there, So just, again, I mean, wow. I think that was a little shorter. I don't know, maybe performed there, whatever performed means, for half, 3/4 of an hour, something like that. And then that one wrapped up, and people rolled up the mats, and we all said our goodbyes, and people smiled, and they're going to be talking about that one for a while. We got back on the bus, and we're not quite ready to go home yet. There's one last stop, and I guess something like this they tend to do every time, which was there's a temple in this area, and we drove there. It was beautiful. It was much nicer than I thought it would be, given how kind of remote and out of it and hard scrapple and poor the village and the school seemed to be. The temple was kind of the entrance to it, brightly decorated with Buddha statues and other kind of statuary that were, not all dilapidated. They were nice, and there was some quite striking statues and stuff made at the very beginning. And then there's the ponds leading right before the temple area, the big, water holding areas. The temple was nice, and there was someone there that sold cold water, and a guy drove up in his little thing selling snails like they do, so some people bought some snails. Someone who comes along on the bus, the wife of one of the musicians, brought food, and here we are, get out of the bus, little seating area there at the temple, everything just piles right out for dishes, and some already had been done rice and fish and chicken and passed around. Next thing you know, we're eating lunch there in this beautiful, peaceful little temple, and kind of just everyone talking with each other and enjoying things and having a nice lunch. As we were wrapping up from lunch, Arn then kind of took the center stage, and I from the way he did it, I guess I assume that they try to do this every time, at least every time that there's visitors, like Cecilia and Joyce and me, which maybe sometimes there aren't at all, but sometimes there are. I like an event where everybody sort of comes together and feels the common experience of that event, and that's what Arn did. He said, so here we are, and what we would really love from you, Tom and Joyce and Cecilia, would be, could you tell us about your experience. Tell us one thing. If you could, tell us one thing you liked about it and one thing you didn't like about it, or just give us a little brief thing for us to take away from what it was for you. Wow. I mean, I just thought that was great. Cecilia went first. I wish I could tell you what both Cecilia and Joyce said. It was right on. It was appropriate. They said the right things. They said no one was. There was nothing. I couldn't think of anything to be critical about. But they said constructive and useful things. And Arn, they said it in English. All of the musicians have some rudimentary English. Some of them are pretty decent. Sam Nang is good. Sema's pretty good. Arn is great as virtually a native English speaker, and then various points in between for everybody else. But nevertheless, Arn translated what the two of them said, so that and talked about it with them. And then when it was my turn, here's what I said. I'll say it really briefly. I sort of pointed to two things. I said, wow, I mean, to me, what I saw was one of the best kind of groups that there is, which is not a leaderless group and not a strong leader group, but a group in which everybody is a leader. And you could just see that all day long. I mean, obviously Arn is the leader, and also Sema has some very important functions that just transcend everything, but everybody else has functions too, and nobody had to be bossing and telling and whatnot, and people took initiatives and made their own decisions about when to start singing and when to stop this song and when to start something else. It just seemed like everybody in the group had a shared general sense of what was supposed to happen, They all had a commitment to making sure that the people they were performing for were entertained and got something out of it. And whenever something had to be figured out or done, the right person just did it. It was a group in which everybody was a leader. And I loved the whole dynamic of it. I just loved it. So that was my first bit of feedback. And then my second bit of feedback, and I've alluded to it earlier about the music, was that they are very dominated by the mental set that they are showing traditional Khmer music to people who haven't seen it for a long time in most cases. And I think they are doing that, but I think they're doing more than that. I think that some of the music that they play is so darn good that anybody anywhere would just say, that's great music. I mean, I don't Cambodian traditional Khmer music, that's just great music. And I told him that too. Arn appreciated it, I guess, and then translated all that, and that was the end of that. We piled back on the bus. People are getting tired now, so yeah, there was some talking and things on the way back down, but everybody was, now that it was the end, and we were relaxing a little bit, and obviously it's a different kind of feeling going back to town again, and it was I don't know what it was by now. It was late afternoon. We got just reversed the whole process. I don't need to go through the details, but in the end, I'm back not in the bus anymore, which is now back at Dekha's place, and back over to Arn's to get the van and down to Phnom Penh. We kept going. One of the things, I should have said this, one of the things that came up in the discussion was that everything that they do was without any kind of power, and that we were outside, and there was a lot of people there, and particularly the Semnang and anyone who was trying to sing had to really be loud, and it's hard on your throat. So the question is, it's nice to not have amplified sound, but sometimes they might just need it. And I guess Arn was feeling that very keenly about how some sort of a powered amplified speaker would just be a top priority, and they'd go to CLA and start talking about that now and see what they could do. And I said, no, don't talk to CLA. Talk to CLA about the big things. This isn't that big. I can just buy that right now. Well, right now became right now. When we got back to Phnom Penh, I went back to my YK art house, took a shower. Oh, that felt so good. And relaxed just a little bit. But pretty soon I was back with them again, and we went to this part of town that has karaoke equipment and audio equipment. It's just, kind of a street where there was like 4 stores of that kind of stuff. After a half an hour of bargaining and playing one store and whatnot, they ended up getting a really sweet, maybe it was a fake JBL powered speaker, but it looked like the real thing to me. I've seen JBL speakers. I know what they looked like. It was different than all the other Korean stuff, stuff around there. I think they ended up getting a genuine 800-watt JBL speaker that I don't know my current prices. I used to know them, but I think it'll be $800 there. They got it for $250. I bought it, and now it's theirs. So we did that, and then after buying that powered speaker, we went out to dinner together, a place along the river. We'd been there before. I described it in a previous podcast episode, I'm sure. Now it was more of us. It was Arn and Sema and me and the 2 young women. One of the players, one of the musicians, I don't have all the names down. I think his name is Sovan. I'm not sure. And his wife, who's the one that had been handling the lunch and all that kind of stuff. And we all had a nice dinner together along the river. And then they took me back to YK Art House, finally by about 8 o'clock on Tuesday night. I was back, my home away from home, which felt like to me to be home. I'm going to end podcast episode 9 right there, because I didn't do much more after that. I took another shower and went to bed nice and early, had a good long night's sleep, and stay tuned for this Cambodian VR project podcast episode 10 coming up soon, and find out how things went today. So let's see, I've been going for a long time. I'm sure there are some very cool parts of the story I've left out. I managed to get the skeleton of the story out, hopefully some of the color and some of the background in there too, but not all of it, I'm afraid. And I've been going about long enough. So thank you. Looking forward to future episodes because I want to see what's going to happen. And bye for now.